Recording.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Welcome to Paul's Money Market Update, number 185 for Monday, the 2nd of June, 2025. I hope you're all well. I hope you had a good weekend. I hope you're having a good start to the week. We're returning this week after I was in the Highlands of Scotland. It was nice to have a few days away, and I was very fortunate for the most part with the weather. As always, okay, if you're joining us for the first time, the Money Market Update is just that. It's me fitting as much as I can in the next 30 minutes, flying through some strength and weakness within FX, indices and commodities markets, looking at some charts of interest you might want to add to your watch list, and then looking at live markets. It's not a signal service, it's not trade recommendations, it's just my view on the market, and it might be of help or use to yourself. As always, it'd be great to know if those of you joining us in the live session, if you can confirm that you can hear my voice and that you can see the slides to make sure the technology is working. That is always very much appreciated. Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you. As always, you're very welcome here. Just remember that you are always responsible for your own trading decisions. If you want a bit of help with your own trading, you want to join an accountability group to make sure that you can basically, remove your bad habits and instill the good habits and discipline, you can join the VTP tag. Either ping me or just look at that QR code. And if you want some more educational elements, I will be doing the ActivTrades Monday Market Matters webinar at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Today, what we're going to be talking about is understanding and using risk on, risk off in your trading. You can register on their website or use the QR code to join us. And on Wednesday evenings, I provide a weekly update on our sort of pulse of the markets at 7 o'clock London time for admiral markets. You're welcome to either register on the website or use that QR code. Okay, let's get to our session today. So if you're new to your journey or just new to joining us, this is just some elements that I take out of my own weekend STAM model. The whole idea being that I want to identify where's the strength and where FX indices and commodities markets, so that I can effectively I allocate my time, energy, and resources more effectively for the week ahead. So where are we, and what's this telling us? We are into week 23 of the year for the 2nd of June. Where's the strength and where's the weakness? Sterling remains strong here, okay? Sort of, it's kind of been there for the last couple of weeks, as you can see. Pretty much more a case of the weakness in others, more so than definite sort of enthusiasm and strength in the sterling. But hey, listen, you'll take it if you're a sterling trader. Swiss franc kind of still remains as an element of strength there, okay, which we might look at a little bit later. Where's the other end of the spectrum? Where's the weakness? Well, definitely that kind of US dollar sort of still remains at the bottom of the pile. Still a bit of a sell America sentiment over the last couple of days, and a lot of that having to do with Trump's comments on Friday about how he was going to double tariffs on steel from 25% to 50% from the 4th of June. Of course, that had a bit of an impact on markets there, and we'll look at that in a moment. But along with that, what we've seen is Aussie dollar, which looked like it was trying to make some sort of climb off its lows, has kind of rolled over and fallen away again, and we'll look at that in a moment. What is kind of interesting to me is when I start to look at the individual currencies, there's a few sterling, okay, a few sterling buy environments, a few euros in sell. There's an awful lot now of those condols in increasing sort of a STAM buying environment. So I will take that on board and I'll look at it. if we look at how the FX markets played out since it opened last night for us here in the UK, that kind of sell dollar has been continued. All right, as you can see, pretty much everything has been strong against the dollar this morning after those comments on Friday afternoon, and also a couple of the commentary over the weekend, and that has played its way out there. And we'll look at that in a moment when we look at we'll look at the US dollar and markets in general. Despite that, what we still have, okay, because Trump's comments there, made stocks a little bit lower over Friday, and they started off a little bit lower this morning as well, certainly in Europe. But the majority of the major indexes, they are still, for the most part, still in tactical and strategic buy environments. That's the way I look at it there. Gold is not in a STAM environment. It's sort of just kind of going a little bit sideways, and a lot of that might be linked to dollar, but we'll look at that in a moment. Silver remains in a strategic buy environment. VIX is a little bit mixed, okay, but at least it's beneath 20. Bitcoin is bullish, but we're going to look at the Bitcoin chart in particular, okay, and part of the charts of interest just to do something. We don't really look at it that much, but we cast an eye over it. But we'll have a little look at that in a couple of moments' time. So, what we're seeing there is that, as I said, there's a little bit of a dollar weakness sentiment. We have kind of an interesting week ahead. Powell is speaking. Tomorrow you've got Ueda from the Bank of Japan, see what impact that has. Then, of course, we're into the first week of the month. We've got JOLTS job openings tomorrow. Okay, we've got Canadian rate cuts, expected rate cut. People expecting 0.25% still on Wednesday. Then we've got the Europeans. I'm expecting the Euro ECB to cut another 25 basis point on Thursday. And then, of course, on Friday, we have non-farm employment, non-farm jobs numbers. So it's going to be an interesting week, okay? We'll have to wait and see how that particularly plays out. There's going to be a lot of data there coming out. So, as always, make sure you're on top of your risk management. Make sure you're on top of understanding the economic calendar. And, of course, in the land of Trump, make sure that you're on top of his basically comments and sentiment, because when we look at the live markets, you'll see how much of an impact that has had on markets itself. Okay, so here we are to the charts of interest. A bit of a different one here. So this is CPB, the Campbells company. They are releasing their data. I think it's before markets open today. Before markets open today. It seemed quite apt to look at this, the Campbell company. Most of you will know it for soup, but on Thursday I was on the battlefield at Culloden, on just off the Moray Firth there, where there was where there is let's not say the Campbell's greatest hour in terms of the Battle of Culloden. And there's still a lot of graves there. Clearly, they decided to change tact after that and moved to America, moved into the soup company. And what a good move that was for them, because pretty much everyone around the world knows Campbell's soup. I'm being a bit facetious there, okay, and probably a bit disrespectful, but there you go. It was quite apt to be able to see that on Thursday and then look at them releasing their earnings on today. Listen, as you can see here, this is a monthly chart here, and it's not been the best start to the year for them. We can see that. Not unsurprised. I was kind of interested that big round numbers at a kind of 50 and 40 have invariably been significant in the past, and now we're in this block here, okay, just north of 30. There's kind of double bottom here, okay, about 32 to moment. Can the numbers be good enough to provide a bit of a base here that we've seen just north of 30? Or if those numbers are poor, does that mean we kind of start to push back down to that 30 big round number as well? So not great, still bearish. You're looking at, will the numbers for that provide support, or will they just basically accelerate that downtrend, I'd say, to the next big round number of 30? Next chart here is Bitcoin. All right, Bitcoin against the US dollar. This is the weekly chart. Why are we interested in this? Well, I'm curious. Okay, I'm curious to see what's going on. I don't consider myself a crypto expert. There are people who can give you much better, deeper insight into the background of the cryptocurrency world. I'm just a trader who looks at charts and makes decisions based upon that. And if you remember, the last time we talked about it was around about here. Okay, we had double topped here. I talked about, we'd had a double top here with bearish engulfing candles. Okay, at 100, and we dropped down to 80. And I talked about how what I wanted to see was how did it react to the red 50-period moving average, because if we look at last year, it had actually used it as a really nice place to bounce from, and that's how far we'd moved north, and actually bang, it did exactly the same here again, and this is what provided us with a great buying opportunity. A right nice 3-bar reversal, bullish bounce off the red period moving average, the 50-period moving average, and as you can see for yourself, and I'm sure you've heard lots of it, we pushed north of 100,000. Okay, and that's where and that's why I'm kind of intrigued, because what I'm intrigued to see is 100, is that big round number 100, where here you could say it acted as an element of resistance. Is this now going to be the line in the sand? Is this kind of going to be flip to support? So for me, if we see, come back to test it and hold above it, for me, that is ultimately bullish. If it can't hold as support, well then I'm looking at down at kind of like 93, 94. So I'm going to be watching, as I said, just seeing how does it react with that 100,000 big round number level. And that's why it's on my charts of interest watch list at the moment. Okay, another different chart here. Okay, a bit closer to home for some of us here for the Monday market update. This is the ISEQ, which is the Irish Stock Exchange. So we haven't got this for a while, but we have a little look at it every so often. I think last time we talked about it was a good while back, and what we were talking about was how was it actually reacting around the 10,000 number, big round number, 10,000. You can see actually, there has been reactions to it. Okay, there's been reactions to it in the past, and actually we started this year in a with a real push to highs. Okay, real push to highs before the sort of Trump tariff tirade rollover. But interestingly, okay, we've talked a lot about how the DAX has recovered quickly and pushed to new highs. But last week we had the ISEQ closing, all right, closing at its highs there. Okay, closing its highs for well, I think it might be all-time highs and stuff. But yeah, as you can see there, kind of what's that? Just around about 11,400. And so once again, I'm curious to see, can it hold up there? All right, flip resistance into support, which is very bullish, I think, longer term. Or is this just a little bit of a flush, right? Is this just a flush to flush out the orders, a bit of a hunt of orders before it kind of sort of rolls back to the 20? So, that is a great recovery move there, great V-shaped recovery move, very strong there. Fabulous to see. Especially those of us from 10, 15 years ago saw how much it had been hammered after the GFC, and for it to be there is a great point. But curious to see, does it actually have the energy to hold up there, or are we going to see a rollover? Yeah, and here's another one as well. Exxon Mobil. Okay, so we're kind of curious because we've seen little bits of manoeuvring in the price of oil. Okay, sort of $60. Certainly for West Texas has been a bit of a level. We bounced off it this morning because of, I think, OPEC cuts. But there's a couple of reasons I'm looking at this. This is the monthly chart of Exxon, and really probably what you can see is for the majority of the last 3 years. Let me just get the old drawing to it. Majority of the last 3 years, okay, we have been basically trading really between $100 and $120. See how we've been doing that. Now, of course, if you're a range bound trader, so clearly bought there years ago 100 and stuff. But what you can see is that that 100 to 120 zone is where we've been. So if you're a range trader, trading that for you. One of the reasons I'm curious and interested in is this last month. Okay, of course, we'll start the new month, and the weekend. Not only was I doing my normal analysis, but I also do my monthly move analysis. There's an awful lot of inside bar pin bars on the monthly charts. We're going to look at them on the dollar in a minute. We also had a good deal of those carrying on here again, and we've got that there. And it's a case of, is this a case that from here as a shorter term, are we coming back to a weekly 50, which it's not really been trading around for since what, so 21, 22, for 3 years plus. Are we going to sort of drift towards that? Does that 100 just become the magnet we drag down to? And if so, what do we do when we get there? Okay, does it support? All right, does it find support here, as it has done lots of times, okay, previously, to push it back to 120? Or does it break it? Okay, if it breaks it, I'd say that's very significant, okay? So once again, it's, watching how that inside pin bar blows out, and as I said, my bias would be for it to drift its way to 100 and then decide what it wants to do there. And once again, that's why it's on my charts of interest. Anybody else in? Oh, okay. So that's the end of the charts of interest. Let's switch across to the live market, shall we? So just bear with me for a moment, and we'll switch across to the live charts. Okay, so I am here. We are. Once again, I'm hoping you can hear my voice and you can now see the charts. This is my kind of indices and commodities profile here. So I've got Dow on the monthly, NASDAQ on the monthly, S&P 500 on the monthly, Russell on the monthly, FTSE on the monthly, Nikkei on the monthly, DAX on the monthly, crude oil on the monthly. So, listen, DAX on the monthly, you can see, last month was a bullish month there on the DAX, wasn't it? And we closed to those highs. We just, the ISEQ, okay, we can see all that volatility we had in April, how we just basically pushed higher there. Okay, that's quite significant, isn't it? Dow, if we look at Dow, it's not a bullish inside bar, but at least it's all right on the monthly chart. It's still closing above 40,000 and the monthly 20. So, it's still NAS. You look at the way that Nasdaq's moved. That is the largest kind of morning star formation that you'll have ever seen. Those three candles there, just that huge volatility pinball there are from the previous month. S100 as well, kind of bullish month there. The kind of one that's of interest is the Russell. Yeah, it closed above the 50, but it's in no way as strong as the other three indices candles there. Is Russell, which some might associate more with Main Street than Wall Street, is that kind of giving us an indication, okay, of what's going on. For the NFP numbers this Friday, most people are expecting lower numbers. I think the forecast is about 130 numbers, and there's also rumours about downgrading the previous numbers and stuff. So that kind of links into sort of working toward Friday, and then the JOLTS job openings tomorrow afternoon might give us some sort of some hint. And then, of course, you've got the ADP on Wednesday as well. So when you look in those Nikkei, okay, Nikkei, that is big morning star, okay, not the most original. Even if you look at FTSE closer to home, okay, that just shows you how much we've bounced and actually how last month was a little bit of a bullish month. But let's have a look at FTSE. You can see for the last month, we did push higher, okay? We have pushed higher. The daily chart, the start of the, we just literally, we hovered above the 50 and the 200. It's only the last couple of weeks, we started to just work our way a little bit higher. Now, is that anything to do with the UK or reaction to sell America and people putting money elsewhere? I'm more inclined to believe the latter rather than the former. But if you have a different view, then please feel free to let me know and stuff. I'd be quite happy to be put right on that. But really, if you look at that, actually, for about the last 6 weeks, really, ever since this big bullish engulfing candle, which was the Trump on the what was in the Rose Garden, that has been a bullish trend, hasn't it? Even in the FTSE, all right, that has been a bullish trend. So, regardless of all shenanigans, shall we say, regarding the Trump trade negotiations, markets are still kind of bullish off it. Markets are still kind of bullish off it. That's the thing that probably we find that's the thing we can't find kind of interesting. If you look at oil, I'm going to go down from oil on the monthly to oil on the weekly. Is that an inverse head and shoulders pattern building? All right. Is that because a good inverse head and shoulders pattern should be the right shoulder should be a little bit higher than the left shoulder. That should give us an indication. Is it a case of 60 has been the line in the sand? All right. We were drifting our way down to it on the daily chart. Bang, you can see there for the last, I was looking at this as maybe kind of a bit of a descending triangle, a descending wedge, the 50 acting as the resistance and 60 acting as support. Can you see how that is? But the interesting thing is look at the 20 period moving average. 20 period moving average has been acting as dynamic support as well. And today, bang, we've had that pop. Is that the start of something? It's a bit too early for me, all right? This is just the excitement of, I think, the OPEC. I need to see us hold above the 50. And then if it is, I'll be looking to see, well, can we make it up to 68 and the 200? That's what I'll be looking there on the on oil. If I go to gold, all right, bang, there's been gold up on the weekly chart. I think I might have talked about this a little bit before and sort of saying, excuse my scruffy drawing, but you get the gist, where we basically sort of have we been building just a kind of a bull flag and an uptrend? Certainly here's where we were last interested, where we had this really nice bounce off the daily 50, like kind of a double bottom, sort of, rejection candles, and we worked our way up there. And once again, how oil was acting, had a 20 daily period moving average acting as support. Well, you might say that there's a little bit of that going on with gold as well. What I'd want to see, I need to draw that a little bit better. All right, I've not drawn that as well as I could have, but there we go. Is that a case of today could be, a bounce off that? Now, of course, with dollar weakness, we would expect that, and I think some of this strength has been primarily dollar weakness, but nonetheless, you have to trade what you see, and I to see that it's breaking that trend line, breaking that bullish flag. This is, I like bull flags to end with a pin bar, which it looks like it might have done there. Then I'm looking at, is that now another bullish move? Okay, even if it's just off the back of dollar weakness. So with that in mind, why don't we go and have a little look at what the dollar's been showing up and what we're doing. We'll have a little look at dollar, and then maybe might have a flick at Aussie. We might have a flick at we'll definitely finish on sterling as we go through. Okay, so I apologize. It's not just me that's been on a holiday and taking a break. I think my computers have as well and stuff. Oh, here we go. All right, so bang, what are we looking at here? This is my dollar profile. So Aussie dollar on the monthly, euro dollar on the monthly, pound dollar on the monthly, dollar Swiss on the monthly, dollar index monthly, dollar yen on the monthly, dollar CAD on the monthly, Kiwi dollar on the monthly. So remember what I was saying about Exxon a few moments ago? A lot of inside bar pin bars on the monthly charts. There you have one on the euro dollar. There you have one on the dollar yen. There you have one on the dollar Swiss franc. Okay, that's it's not an inside bar. Okay, I'd call that more of a sort of spinning top indecision candle. That's actually, I'd say that's more bearish on the Aussie, but we'll look at that moment. Dollar against Canadian dollar, I had a little bit of an intraday trade there this morning, but it's not inside bar. That's kind of a bearish pin bar there, but you can see that. And dollar index itself is a bearish inside bar pin bar. Okay, as I said, monthly charts, lots of them showing up. Perhaps not a massive the volatility of April, but you can see there, we're monthly, we've had 2 months closing beneath 100 now. That's the sort of thing, I kind of take interest in. I was looking at here, I thought maybe we built a base, and then of course the negotiations and the tariffs and has pushed it lower. Is that really what Trump investment want? Discuss that amongst yourselves, ladies and gentlemen. Ultimately, all we're looking to see is, getting a handle on what the dollar's doing to see, how can we trade it. As I said, this is the daily chart. I looked inside up to the 50. I thought we'd come down to 100 and maybe bullish scenario would be back through the 50, but that's certainly not happened, does it? It's come back down to this kind of what would you call that, about 98.70 area, which we've popped up again. And then, then every time it comes up to 100, it gets battered down again. So bearish dollar, all right? That's the bearish dollar. Someone might say, well, Paul, excuse my drawing as always. You might be saying, well, Paul, is this really just a descending triangle, okay, descending wedge that we see building here, okay? And of course, as I said, we have an awful lot of data. Powell's coming out speaking tonight, an awful lot of data with NFP and with NFP on Friday. So there's an awful lot there, regardless of any kind of Trump trade talks. There's an awful lot going on there that can basically shift the needle on this. So I will be watching this like a hawk this week to see what the score is, to give us an indication, okay, of the kind of the continued direction of the dollar and how it shows up against the others. So so you can see that from the dollar, what's going on there. As I said, let's have a little look at Aussie. I might just put Aussie onto the weekly charts here because Aussie has kind of dropped. As I said, it looked like it was climbing out of its the lows of the STAM, but then that kind of didn't materialize. Okay, certainly, if we look, having kind of looked like it was strengthened against, let's say, against the euro. The last couple of weeks has been a bit of a pullback there. Same against the sterling, but sterling strength, Aussie weakness. Aussie against the Swiss franc the last couple of weeks, okay, has kind of that Aussie weakness, Swiss franc strength. Aussie against the yen, all right, has kind of been shifting its way down there. Aussie against the Kiwi dollar, all right, which has been in a trend, but we had a little bit of what is clearly a pullback in a continued downtrend. Even Aussie against Canadian dollar the last couple of weeks. So, as I said, it's not been a great year for the Aussie, and I thought maybe we'll sort of see a little bit of a turn, but that's taken a particular breather, hasn't it? So, that as we can see, you can see from the price action, you can see from the STAM, it's dropped its way back into the bottom of the pile there again. So, there is a little bit of Aussie data. GDP on Wednesday. We'll see whether that is enough to sort of check at the moment, but that's what I see on Aussie there. Okay, it's a weakening story at the moment. Let's finish with sterling as always. Okay, I'll have a look. So sterling is at the top of the STAM, all right, and as I said at the start, a good deal of that strength is due to the weakness of others, the US dollar in particular. And that's what we're sort of trying to understand when we look at the charts. Yeah, here's my sterling profile. So I've got cable, euro sterling, pound Aussie, pound CAD, pound yen, pound Swiss, pound New Zealand, and FTSE. Right, FTSE we've already looked at. Let's have a look at cable. What's cable telling us? So, bang. Monthly chart, okay, monthly chart, that is the highest close, okay, since around about here, what's that, back in 2022. All right, so it's the monthly close. All right, it's a bit of a high wave candle, but it's a bullish close and the bullish highest close for years, okay? So, you don't disregard that. When we look at the weekly chart, a few weeks ago, I was looking here and saying, were we sort of having a bit of a enthusiasm, all right, ebbing moment, okay, 3 pin bars there, trident top, and I thought, well, maybe we could just roll over here, okay, and come back to 130, but we couldn't get past this, 10 period moving average, and as you can see, bang, we've had these kind of huge moves up there, right, and the move off that. Now, we did have a bit of a rejection candle last week, but this week, okay, that has started well. But that, I think, is a lot of dollar selling, all right? More dollar selling than love of the sterling. If you look on the daily chart, if you look at the daily chart, let's just put this in here, sorry. And if I look at that on the daily chart, excuse my drawing, but you get the gist, all right? That would look as like a bull flag in an uptrend. All right, it's a continuation pattern, an uptrend. That's what people would be looking for. And those highs of kind of April have flipped to being from being resistance to support. So that just continues that kind of bullish sterling, weak dollar shift. If we look at a couple of the others, that considering it's top of the pile, it is not as clear cut as you would expect, right, from a lot of these particular charts. As we said, Pound against the Aussie has been basically pound strengthening against the Aussie. If you look at that over the last couple of weeks, mostly against the Kiwi. It had done against the Canadian dollar, but even the Canadian dollar, if you look at that, pound against Canadian dollar the last month or two has been pretty. The price action there has not been particularly. What's the right word? Embrace it. It doesn't make you want to embrace it. Okay, certainly not as a longer term swing trader off like daily and weekly charts. Where I start to look at also is close to home in terms of risk ideas. Okay, so let's look at pound against Swiss franc. Bang, we had the big drop because there's risk off. Then there's kind of like fatigue and there's risk on. And if we go down to the daily chart, we did have a bit of risk on the move. But if you look at that for the last couple of weeks between pound and Swiss franc, considering you've got, that's one of the reasons you're trading like you don't trade 1v2 on the STAM is because very often they cancel each other out, and I would say that is what is occurring there. And so I'm waiting to see which one of them gives us a real good strong indication of the real row sentiment. Okay, so is it a case of if we drop from here and that's Swiss franc strength, well, we're risk off. If we rally and get above that 200, that's risk on. Okay, that's sterling strength. So you can see that it's just going sideways, but even that going sideways can help us in terms of building the overall picture. And then finally, let's have a little look at euro against sterling. Okay, yeah, you've heard me going on about the same story with this for for years now. We came back to the 50, all right, which had acted as resistance for a couple of years, and actually last week we printed, that's a bit of a 50 period moving average bounce there. Okay, 84 has acted as a bit of support. Okay, we're above the 20, might not necessarily be the most. That's also kind of a 3-bar reversal there. That's what we've been looking at on that daily chart. Look at that big daily bullish key reversal off the 200 period moving average. All right, bit of euro strength, even though sterling's supposed to be the top of the stand. Even though ECB are expected to cut rates on Thursday, managed to sort of drift a little bit higher, okay, against sterling. Now, for me, it really needs to get above that daily 50 to convince me of some sterling weakness against the euro there. But certainly, I'd have been keeping an eye on that. Okay, that was the move there from last week. Does it have what it takes to carry it on? Or is this just a little bit of a bounce before it rolls down beneath 84 when they cut rates on Thursday? Okay, gentlemen, let's draw that to a close. I appreciate we overran a few minutes. I apologise. Just always trying to fit in as much as I possibly can for our session. I hope it's given me a bit of insight. All right. As I said, it is a busy week ahead, so make sure you're on top of the news. Make sure you're on top of the risk. Make sure you're on top of the Trump tweets. And, as I said, I'll be doing the ActivTrades talk in about 55 minutes. Okay, looking at understanding RORO. So you're welcome to join us for that. For the rest of you, have a fabulous trading week. Okay, and I wish you the best of success in your trading endeavours, and I'll speak to you soon. Many thanks, everybody. Cheers.